So we're going to begin again. I apologize. I've started recording. So
okay, that was a practice.
Thank y'all for your patience. Today we're presenting New Mexico Main Street Financing Development on Main Street Local Program Roles, presented today by Keith Chelstrom, Economic Vitality, and I'm Anna Bly, the Communications and Media Specialist with New Mexico Main Street.
Thanks, Anna. And why aren't you? I think you have to activate it first with this, and then I can move it. Yeah. Okay. Thanks for attending, everybody. This is Keith Chelstrom with New Mexico Main Street. And a couple housekeeping things. I wanted to mention that there are a lot of folks online watching this and listening. So we're going to only be able to take questions by you typing them in. So anytime during the presentation, if you want to type in your questions, we'll be addressing those at the end. And I think I have tried not to overload this with so much information that we won't have time. I think we will have time for addressing the questions at the end. So please type those in as they come to your mind. We'll pick those up later. Also, another housekeeping item is that there are 3 handouts. You don't necessarily need those handouts right at the moment for presentation. You can just get them later if you'd like, or you can download them at any time and reference them during the webinar. Also, if you have any questions, of course, you can all me afterwards, and I hope that would be a result of a successful webinar. Successful coverage of this material is that you'll want to contact me for more, or also for covering anything that was covered during the webinar itself. So what are we going to go through today? We're going to, I think what it is each time we're not over on the screen, we've got to get back, and then I can move forward. Technical challenges. So we're going to do 5 finance fallacies first, going to go over those. We're going to quickly look at the forces of value, economics. I want us to breeze through the community-initiated development process, some of the key steps. We're going to then look at strategies for applying enhancements, which are economic incentives to our local real estate development process. We're going to look at some of the economic development financing programs for Main Street. We don't have time today to look at all of them. There are certainly a whole lot of them. They don't use as much as they should, so we're really interested in digging into as many as possible, but unfortunately we don't have the time to dig into all of them today. Highlights. And I got to say it was hard to pick the highlights among the so many, but I didn't want to try to cover too. So we're going to look at some highlights. And we've got to go back here again. Yeah, every time you go there, it deactivates. And then at the end, go local leaders. And Anna's going to discuss the webinar interface technicalities that I don't understand.
And again, thank you all for tuning in. People may be experiencing some issues depending on your settings or browser connection. We are recording this session, so we will make it available on YouTube later, so that hopefully that might improve quality of sound for those of you having some sound difficulties. Today's session will be roughly 30 minutes. Those tuning in are in audio-only mode, so that means on mute just to try to avoid feedback in the system. You can either listen in by calling into the conference call number that was provided in your registration, or through your computer device if you have microphone functionality set up. And as Keith mentioned, somebody did ask about questions and entertaining them. When we finish the presentation, we will have a short 15-minute, but don't feel limited to that because questions could also come in to Keith later on. If you kind of go away from the webinar and you've thought about something and you want to explore it more, we're going to have that discussion later. And if you are using the system for questions, there is a box that you could type in for questions via the webinar controls. And we have noticed that several people have been using that. So bear with us if you are having some sound difficulty. We will hopefully make it available to you later.
So to start discussing the 5 finance fallacies, I wanted to, just for fun, reference Monopoly, which is a real estate board game. And the screen is involved in this. You know, back in the old days, people played board games. And then I started realizing, when was the last time I played Monopoly, the satisfying real estate game of Monopoly? And I realized that has been a few decades at least. So I don't know whether we have a shared cultural reference for Monopoly or not. So explain what it was. What happened was you move around the board after you got some money from the bank and you rolled the dice. And then you, as you moved around the board, you bought properties and then you spent your money flipping them and you became a real finance czar. And it was really satisfying. I found it really satisfying to charge my dad a whole lot more money to rent the spot when he landed on it than he ever gave me an allowance. And I found it really satisfying to make my little brother bankrupt. And it was extra satisfying if I could reduce him to tears. And then the game ended when everybody on the board ran out of money except for the winner. Is that right? Do you remember it that way, Anna? I think so. And then at our house, you know, if you ever play board games, at our house it also ended more frequently in other ways, like a Warriors game came on TV and my dad had to go watch that, or I got from a girl, like an actual live girl on a live phone call. Back in the old days, there was hardline phones, and you would actually have real conversations with people. So if that happened, then I abandoned the game. And another common way it ended was that my brother would just throw the Monopoly board up in the air in a tantrum after the limit. So let's look at some of the fallacies of finance using Monopoly as an example. The first fallacy is local folks, local leaders, project owners or partners thinking that all our projects are financing. And that's almost never true. Because in Monopoly there was this one chance card you could get where you could take that card and then you would go all the way around the board and you would collect your $200. You wouldn't have to take all of the hard steps of marching your player piece across the board. And you would just get that easy money. But that easy money doesn't happen very often on the board game or in real life in financing real estate. You've got to do all of the hard work of getting your project concept ready, of lining up all of the analysis for your project, and you just don't usually get to skip all those steps. So when I hear people say, all we need is financing, or if they want to start a conversation with just about the money, it's not about that. It's about all of the things you need to do to plan your project appropriately in order for it to be deserving of financing, for it to be bankable, for it to attract investment from others. The second fallacy, it's alive and well out there, and I think it comes from people advertising on the internet and on late night television, that there are somehow these magical government grants out there that are just amazing and that everyone has access to them and that they're kind of secret. But if you could only get your hands on some of those free dollars, then you made and your project hasn't made. And I guess in the decades that I've worked with folks who are working on projects and putting the money together to do projects, I personally never seen that kind of easy money. And if you do get a grant, there are a few grants that go towards economic development projects. They're usually just a small piece of the overall project. There's usually debt financing, equity financing, and other investments into a project before a grant is even going to be a viable hallucination. So that's fallacy number 2. The third fallacy is that, okay, well, if we got to do all of our work and apply to a program, then we're just going to apply to one program and get that check in the mail for our entire project. And it's just going to come from that one single source, and then our problems are solved. And that's rarely true, perhaps never. The reality is that local real estate projects get financed from a variety of sources, and they have to be pieced together. And I recently, in having a conversation with some developers in Las Cruces recently, I, for the first time, heard the term financing stack. The developer said that, yes, you know, any projects that we work on, they tend to be complicated, and we need to bring our funds together in a stack. So I think the image of a stack of money, we'd all like a stack of money, and a big one, but I think the image of a stack of money is a good idea because it's showing it's coming from different places, and you're compiling that financing stack. You're leveraging different sources with each other, and most importantly, you're leveraging the ability to get others to invest by having your own equity in the project. The fourth fallacy is that, okay, now that we've done our homework, this is going to be an easy deal because it's not that big of a project, it's not that complicated, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And anybody who's gone through a development project will say it turned out not to be so easy. No one finds a small to a very large project to be an easy deal. So there's this idea out there that we could just have an easy deal, but no, we usually have to, even on the small projects, make our way the hard way around that monopoly board in putting together our real estate project. So that's number 4. Number 5, the last fallacy, is that, okay, stuff is really complex, it's complicated, it's difficult, it's hard to follow, it comes together in complicated ways, so I may as well not participate because I'm not an expert. And I can't really help and be a good player on a development team or be supportive to our private investors in our community because I'm not an expert. Well, that's absolutely not true. So I think this is the most important fallacy that we've got to get over, is that we on Main Street, our diverse expertise, our diverse things that we can, talents and time and energy that we can bring to a development project, they're all essential, and it does take a diverse team, eclectic team, to pull off projects of all different sizes in your downtown. So you don't have to be an expert, you have to be a willing student. You have to be willing to really dive in and be like me. Don't be embarrassed, ever. Don't be embarrassed when you don't know something, because guess what? In this finance business, there's going to always be a whole lot more that you don't understand than what you do understand. And I've had friends and contacts who work with financing programs all of their professional life, and they validate my comments here. They validate my perspective when they tell me that even though I've been doing it forever, there's no easy deals, it's always complicated, and I never feel like I can really be a total expert on this because every deal is different and it always changes. So you're in good company if you don't feel like an expert. Go ahead and be humble, but don't be shy. Get in there and help work with your local real estate development project. So we're done with the fallacies. Let's look at some economics of real estate and look at the forces of value. Real estate textbooks and certainly real estate appraisal textbooks advise that when you are appraising a property, you want to look at 4 different aspects. that affect the value of a piece of real estate. Political value is things like what do the local laws and the county laws and the state laws and the federal laws say that you can do with this property? What's the zoning? What's the local political support for more intense use on the property? Physical value is all kinds of things go into that, including what are the neighbors like? How healthy are the businesses surrounding the property? Has the downtown community reinvested in streetscape? Is a lot of stuff around the building the property that the property owner doesn't necessarily control but adds to the property value? Those are definitely things that are physical value. Social value is stuff like how good is the location in terms of the way that the community residents and visitors to the community have access to the site. And economic value is all sorts of things, such as what's the highest and best use, what are the things that you can do with your building, what is the marketplace, say, for the demand for goods or services that you want to sell out of your building. So you're probably thinking, 4 quadrants here, kind of looks familiar, 4 points, the Main Street 4 points. And that's not at all a surprise, because in Main Street we are working in those 4 areas all the time. So you are already working in real estate economics 100% of your time on your Main Street work, whether you feel like you're an expert yet or not. So the political value corresponds to your organization work. The physical value, of course, corresponds to your work in the design area. Social value, your work in the promotion area, and naturally economic vitality covers your economic value. So it's validating and very sound to know that when we're doing our Main Street program, we are addressing real estate economics all the time, and then vice versa. When we have real estate economic development opportunity, we're armed with our 4 points that we can bring to bear. So if you think in any given project, how can I help this particular project? Think in terms of how could I help it through organization? How could I help this project through promotion? How could I help it through design? How could I help it through economic vitality? That would be a very powerful way of looking at how your program and your leaders, your volunteers and your board and your committees and teams, how they could really help launch a project off the ground. Next, I wanted to mention the community-initiated development. I hope that many of you have heard about this before. It's a framework that was put together decades ago by Don Ripkema in partnership with the National Trust for Historic Preservation. And Don has conducted training in New Mexico many times. And over the years, the community-initiated development really has been a good framework for us, and it continues to be as we move forward in working harder in real estate development. So community-initiated development is organized in these 5 different stages, and then on this is one of the handouts, lists each stage and then the critical steps within each stage. And I should say that the handout and the framework is all backed up by a whole bunch of materials that you can purchase from the National Trust for Historic Preservation. And you can also talk to me about those materials, and I can share some of the materials that I have from CID trainings that I've attended over the years. So in the concept stage, for example, helping to identify a development opportunity is something that a Main Street program can help with. Helping an owner formulate a skeletal plan, that's one of the steps. Identifying different sources of help on the project within the community and outside of the community. Reviewing the available information. So those of you with the handout already see that there are 11 different steps just in the concept stage, but helping a property owner and a business owner with their concept is absolutely one of the things that all of us can help with when it comes to being an expert. We're all an expert at giving advice about concepts and helping conduct a dialogue with a property owner, business owner, to refine a concept of what they want to do with their building. Again, there's an example where putting your heads together and bringing different perspectives together, there's never any wrong answers. It's really good to have discussions about it. And over and over and over again, I've seen the value of Main Street teams helping local property owners to envision what they're going to do and to get more specific about their concept and to encourage them to have the right level of specificity so that they can be financeable. Is financeable a word? It is today. Okay. The next stage is analysis stage, and there's all sorts of ways that Main Street can help in this area. Example step under the analysis stage of number 5, step number 5 is assemble technical assistance team. And by extension, the New Mexico Main Street architectural design consultant has helped many property owners and business owners figure out from an architectural design perspective what the viability of their building is, what the options are of how they could rehabilitate their building for different uses. Some other items are conducting preliminary cost estimates, preliminary financial pro forma analysis, calculating the gap between cost and value, and these are ways that a local Main Street program and the state Main Street program can help you in analyzing a local project. And then there's the preparation stage of getting ready for the development, implementing the actual property rehabilitation or new construction, the operation of the building once it's all done. And so those are all organized as steps within the 5 stages of community-initiated development. So very sorry, just covering the tip of the iceberg of CID, but I hope useful in just reminding us that that very powerful framework is there for us to refer to. It'll do 2 things. One, it will show you that real estate development is indeed very complicated. There are an enormous amount and sometimes overwhelming amount of steps, but also when we take into account and are cognizant of all the different steps, we can work our way through the steps better and take things one incremental step at a time. The steps aren't 100% linear. Nothing in life and reality ever is, but that's one of the ways we break down the elephant and eat one bite at a time. Another framework that a friend of mine attended a New Mexico IDEA training, that week-long training that they usually hold in Silver City several years ago, and he gave me a copy of this handout. So I've given you a copy. You can download that as part of this webinar. And I'm particularly fond of this chart, and I sort of apologize ahead of time that it's not really readily understandable. But I think it's really helpful in reminding me of how to focus in on gap analysis, meaning what's the difference between a project's need for financing, how much money they need to get the job done, versus what are the different sources that can be pulled together for a project, and the missing money is the gap. And it also reminds me of, in the middle column, the enhancement analysis of trying to break down, well, using our different government tools and nonprofit tools, foundation tools, and public-private tools, how could we help address the gap? There are different tools address financing gaps in different ways. So this is a good reference chart. This is an example of something that if you have a project you're working on, maybe you reported it to us in your pipeline and you'd like to have a conversation with me, we might pull out this chart and it might help us focus on diving into the particular financing programs that look promising for a particular project. So again, this is a introduction of a concept. We're not going to be understanding it fully today, but I just wanted to put it in front of your eyes. So let's look at zeroing in a little bit on how this chart works. So in project development, I've already said that the MainStreet program helping a project proponent or a project development team focus in on and developing its project concept is a very powerful thing, and that it's time after time, no matter how sophisticated the development teams are, they need this. They need that help and appreciate that help. So helping with project proposal is something we can do. And as part of the analysis, the money analysis, the financial feasibility analysis looks at what is it going to take for the project to be viable. And most often you don't get that acceptable because there's the financing gap. It turns out to be unacceptable because there are project gaps. And so let's say the project gap was your financial pro forma statements show that there was not going to be enough cash flow from the project as currently envisioned in order to support all of the costs like paying the mortgage, paying the construction loan, etc. So what might you do to increase revenue generated by the project? One thing might be bringing in historic preservation tax credits or new markets tax credits into the project in order to enhance the bottom line and make it more financially viable, and that is addressing the gap. That's gap financing. So let's leave this complicated chart and make sure to use it later, if for no other reason than to humor me, because I still like this chart after more than a decade. And here's another handout then, is the, this represents a project I'm currently working on because Rich Williams, the director of MainStreet, and the rest of our team and EDD have tasked me with doing a better job of digging into the financial tools across the state that we can use in our MainStreet programs across the state. So this is my working list right now, and I've shared that with you as one of the handouts. And in the coming weeks, I'll be emailing to all of you a matrix, a chart that provides some essential details to each of these financing tools. And the stuff on the chart is, for the most part, not going to have anything that you can't find online, but it will do the work of pulling that together in one convenient piece for you. And I have found that some of these are moving targets. So finding updates online, and then also I'm calling people and getting example projects that have been financed from them, and also any kinks or differences or nuances in interpretation of how New Mexico MainStreet programs can use these financing tools. So I'll be reflecting that information in the upcoming matrix that I'll be emailing to you in a few weeks. So what we're going to do is look at a few of these in a minute, but first just note that they've been categorized, and I'll tell you, just categorizing them was a challenge. You've got to get to know them enough to figure out what box to put them in, and also there's some significant overlap between the categories, but it's good to think of them this way, I think. There are local government tools, and we've listed those from MRA and TIF through IRBs, and then other things that local governments can do, such as offering favorable terms for selling a city-owned property to a property owner or business. As long as they have local data, they could do that. So local government tools is a category. The next category is real estate project loans, and those come in the form of actual loans as well as loan guarantees that are actual loans backed up by SBA or USDA. There's real estate project tax credits. There's state economic development incentives, community facilities and infrastructure financing, programs specifically for business development in rural areas from USDA, our small business loan toolkit from a bunch of small business serving organizations. And then I don't want us to forget about technical assistance. That's a very important category, although it's not direct financing. All of the small business technical assistance programs listed there are geared towards providing greater access to small businesses of the financing that they need and can be very helpful in that regard. So SBDCs and SBA and others that are listed there. And then coordination efforts too, I think, are important. Here at the Economic Development Department, the Fund It initiative tries to pull together very promising projects to be presented in front of intergovernmental and various governmental agencies with the challenge of trying to figure out in what ways could their particular government agency financing tools help a local project. And then the RESTRA project, which New Mexico Main Street is enrolling in by listing the projects that we are currently trying to find financing for. That's a good communication and coordination effort to show which projects across our state Main Street effort are looking for financing that might come from federal, state, and regional government sources. So looking at a couple of these in detail, I hope that by now in your Main Street career you've heard a lot from Charlie Deans and the New Mexico Main Street program coaching about how to put together a metropolitan redevelopment area and the importance of that to access tax increment financing locally, enabling you to put together public-private partnerships and development agreements between the local government and the development team, the private developer, creating or revising your regulations and providing incentives. With an MRA, the city can acquire land or buildings that can be used for an economic development project, and pulling together funding, financing for projects that can come from having a tax increment financing district. That district can issue revenue bonds, and those can be invested in economic development projects. There are preferences and eligibility in CDBG and state and federal brownfield funds if you've got an adopted MRA. And under LEDA, the local MRA can be a qualifying entity under LEDA if it's adopted their metropolitan redevelopment area plan and MRA district. Quickly moving now to loans and loan guarantees. Some examples are from the collateral support program of the New Mexico Finance Authority, from SBA 504 or SBA 7A programs, which are the basic loan programs, very powerful loan programs that the Small Business Administration provides by providing funding to banks across New Mexico. And the SBA Resource Guide lists countless banks throughout New Mexico who participate or are set up to participate in SBA 7A programs. And then the Rural Business and Industry Loan Guarantee Program from USDA is one of those programs that is in this category of loans and loan guarantees. Preservation tax credits, heard of these before too. We have a pretty darn good state historic preservation tax credit that provides for 50% income tax credit for projects for rehabilitation costs, up to a total tax credit that you can use for, I think it's 5 years, on your income tax, state income taxes up to a total of $25,000. And then if you're in an arts and culture district, then that property can spend $100,000 and get a $50,000 tax credit. And the federal preservation tax credit is even bigger dollar volume, 20% of eligible rehab expenses. And there's lots of details there, but that can be a very substantial financing tool for effectively bringing in equity into a project. And for both of the state and the federal, you have to meet historic register listing requirements, like be individually listed on the state or national registers, or be listed as a contributing building to a historic district. And of course, for being able to get the credits, the tax credits, you must follow the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation. And almost all the time, that is what a property owner wants to do when tackling a significant quality historic building. That protects the property values the best by following those Secretary of the Interior standards. So the smartest property owners want to do that usually. Why not get the tax credits to reward them for doing that hard work? The state LEDA capital outlay source is a very powerful source in New Mexico, and you've seen it being used in our Historic Theaters Initiative. Those are grants to local governments for local economic development projects. They must result in private sector job creation. There's a local ordinance that needs to be adopted by projects in order to access the state LEDA funding. As I said, the Historic Theaters Initiative is an example where we've seen this used in Main Street. But there's also other places, and I hope there's a promise for more places that state LEDA can be used in New Mexico Main Street districts. And an example is in Silver City for the brewery and distillery that was, or it has just recently been an extension of the Little Toad Creek presence, a very important business in downtown Silver City. Then there's the current New Mexico Main Street Public Infrastructure Funding Program. And that's for construction funding for public projects that already have their construction-ready documents. And it can cover things such as utilities and lighting, pedestrian and safety improvements, all kinds of street amenities, important public spaces like plazas, town squares. And going by the name of New Mexico Main Street Capital Outlay, over the years since 2000, this program has financed an amazing number of catalytic projects in our Main Street districts. So sorry I didn't post the due date, but I hope that all of you are aware of the current New Mexico Main Street Public Infrastructure Funding Program. That proposals are supposed to be coming in really soon now, so I hope that if you're interested in this one, you're already working on it. And if you haven't gotten started yet or have any questions or would like to discuss it with our Main Street team at any time, please call any one of us. And Daniel Gutierrez is probably your first contact there, but you know, we work as a team, and I don't think there's too many things I can answer on this one without checking with Daniel, but if you want to call me or anybody else on our team, go ahead and we will help you do your research on this program. Then another category is small business loans, and there's several different organizations that provide those, and they've always been enthusiastic when we help them, when we ask them to help us with training our Main Street programs, and they show up on site in our Main Street communities when we ask them to help look at a particular project. So if you are not capitalizing on your pretty powerful small business loan resources in New Mexico, don't be shy, do that. Part of their job description for all these organizations, Accion, Loan Fund West, and the credit union, as well as Enchantment Land Development Corporation. All of those, a key part of their job is outreach. And if you call them, they like it. They like that a lot because that means they didn't have to call you, or their outreach has been successful. So it's a win already from the first time you call them. And so they really are accessible. Don't be shy. There are no bad questions. Just call them and ask them how they might be able to help you in your community, your downtown businesses. So I'd like to switch gears now from looking at a few of those key financing programs to looking at a summary of the roles of our Main Street organizations when it comes to helping with financing. I think the first one I would label declaring your intentions. Just from your community and from your local property owner, being able to declare that we want to do something with this particular building. And in this case, it's an example from Carlsbad submitted on the New Mexico Main Street pipeline. They want to keep the IOOF building, and they have some different ideas for uses, such as an upscale restaurant and other things. So declaring your intentions and letting you've got a public-private interest in developing a particular building in your downtown is a really powerful step in and of itself. Defining what incentives you may bring to bear for possible. Farmington is doing a good job of that. They are still in process. Farmington Main Street and Farmington Downtown Association and the city have a goal of being more specific about the different incentives that they can bring to projects. And they are currently working on those, improving the brochure, but they've already got this nice brochure out there, and they've got some listings and some feel for how to use the different financing tools in their Metropolitan Redevelopment Area District. Similarly, Downtown Las Cruces partnership is working on addressing the question, what incentives, what local financing programs, state financing programs, regional ones, federal ones, can we really, really, truly use and offer to businesses and property owners? What can we really put out there in a brochure we want to do in the next couple months that are really going to be workable? So they are in process of investigating the big, long laundry list of financing tools and exploring those tools in depth of how they can best work for the types of projects that are happening in their very exciting revitalization of their downtown. And the photo there is a picture of their plaza that's under construction. It's just going to be fantastic with these amazing water features. I can't wait to go back. Recruiting businesses. Your work in recruiting businesses really is part of the overall package of financing local projects, because if you think about it, part of the economics of a building rehab is, well, who are going to be the tenants, or who's going to occupy the building? What is going to be inside the space that is generating the revenue in order to afford the development of that space, the rehab of that space? So all of your work to recruit businesses, whether it's helping with window displays, helping to advertise vacancies through the windows, or having a good listing of available properties on your website, all of the stuff you do for recruiting businesses is helping the real estate finance equation. Another whole area of roles for local Main Street programs is what I would call facilitating the dialogue. And a very meaningful example for me is the many years that the Main Street program worked in partnership with other economic development players in Clovis, especially the city, to keep the dialogue alive about rehabilitating and reusing, putting Clovis back into productive reuse. And so back in 2001, they asked the state historic preservation officer to come visit and take a look at the building, and the city and the Main Street program declared that they wanted to save that building. So what did they do? They declared their intentions. And if they hadn't done that very important step in 2001, then they wouldn't be where they are today with a fully rehabilitated Hotel Clovis for a wonderful housing project. But it took a lot of time. And it took staying in the dialogue and leading the dialogue and leading that project over many, many, many years. And one of the early things that Hotel Clovis development folks did, the Main Street program did, was to host, they hosted Hotel Clovis study team analyses of the building, and that helped further the dialogue by pulling together different information about the project and facilitating the local community input about the dreams and visions for the building's reuse. And New Mexico Main Street and Economic Development Department were lead players in helping with that community study way back in 2001, 2002. So this is really important, and I've seen this pattern repeat itself over again in our successful New Mexico Main Street catalytic project developments, is the important role that the city and Main Street play in leading that dialogue. Assisting with the business and individual businesses planning. We recently worked with Lovington Main Street, recently worked with brew pub owners to work on their business plan for putting a brew pub together in Lovington. And we saw firsthand how powerful it was, how meaningful it was for the community to help give input to the businesses and to the different support organizations to give input to the business owners in their business planning process. And that's something I think we should be repeating in other Main Street communities. And of course, if a business has a really good business plan, then they're going to be either a really good owner of a building that they rehab, or they're going to be a really good tenant in a financed real estate project. Another example of possible role, and this is not for the shy or the wary, but diving in and working on co-developing a project with a private developer. And they're doing that in the Borealis Main Street program with the proposed Calle Cuarta marketplace, which would be a food sort of incubator, but a different an incubator of small businesses that address an eclectic food mix right in the building, and the building is a mixed-use project with developers coming in, putting in housing and other uses. And then the Main Street organization is working on this small business incubation around food and specialty foods and the intersection between food and culture. So that's a very exciting and promising project that we're all watching in Borealis, and wish them the best of luck over the next few years. Another really important real estate role, and it's not about the brand new buildings and businesses as much as about your existing businesses, but strengthening the existing businesses in town, because we're always strengthening the possibilities of a particular investment location for a new building and new businesses if we have strong existing businesses that are making good money and paying good rents, so that the buildings that they're in can be kept up and rehabilitated and doing well. So remember that our very important role of helping existing businesses is a key foundation of the Main Street program, and it comes into play absolutely when we think about bringing in new investment into the community. We've got to have our existing businesses doing well and our existing buildings doing well. And lastly, a last role, and this is an area I think that we should dive into more in the local Main Street programs, and should do more of, and that boards of directors should consider authorizing a little more of their executive directors' precious time resource into helping the most promising local business and building applicants to work on their applications, because all of our different tools out there, the applications are can be complex. They all have to be professionally done, and no matter how good those business or building owner applicants are, they really could use our help in putting their best applications forward. So I think helping with applications is an important role for us. So in conclusion, I just would reiterate, encourage you to jump in the game. Here's our Monopoly game at the table. Superior graphics produced by Keith Chelstrom. Amazing. But don't be shy, jump in, and when you gather around the folks at the table, you'll realize we all have something different to contribute, and like I said earlier, not everybody's an absolute expert, and even if you are, you still got to keep your ears open and learn more, because the real estate finance game is a changing, dynamic, complex thing, and so you've got to keep learning and stay in that learning mode. So speaking of the learning mode, a couple of next steps. As I wanted to reiterate that I mentioned earlier, I'm working on that matrix of financing programs, and I hope to email that out to you in the next several weeks. And then, very exciting, coming up in October, our Leadership Network meeting is hosted in Las Vegas, and the topic will be focusing on real estate development, financing your development projects, and thankfully Las Vegas is a very exciting laboratory for that, with projects like the Castañeda Hotel that we can think about, learn about, look at. So we have a living laboratory in Las Vegas to dig into, and that's going to be a really good learning experience and networking experience. So real estate development financing is a very important topic for New Mexico Main Street. We're committed to jumping in and playing that game with you, and got good things ahead on that. So I'd like to say thank you now then, and we'll see if there are some questions, and we'll address those one at a time.
Okay, and actually Keith mentioned in his presentation a couple of deadlines for some public infrastructure related calls that we have here at New Mexico Main Street. So June 27th is the deadline for the Great Blocks on Main Street, and we have June 30th as a deadline for an invitation related to public infrastructure funding. And Rich Williams would be your contact for Great Blocks, and Daniel Gutierrez would assist you with the public infrastructure funding. And I just wanted to get those deadlines out there for you guys.
Thanks, Anna.
Let's see. Some great questions. Thank you all.
Is there a way to open that up more?
I'm not succeeding very well. Hang in there, guys. Sorry about that. Okay, so there is something, a mention about funding sources for trail and street projects.
Well, this is where it would be nice to be interactive, because I'd like to know what types of trails. Is that all part of the same question?
Let's see.
Is there a way you can drag down the bar so we can?
I'm not really doing success today.
What if you clicked on question? Can you?
Sorry, guys. There was also a mention of an MDOT Tiger grant. Let's see.
Hi, I've not looked into that, but I'm going to add that to the list.
Is there operation funding available for business retention interviews that you're aware of, Keith?
So the question is there funding to help you fund a program for business retention interviews? If you're a rural program, if you're in a rural community, the USDA Rural Development can support a business retention and expansion interview survey as part of a comprehensive business support services business development program. So I think yes, and I would hope that the person asking the question is from a rural community, and then they could look into the USDA, and it's the USDA Rural Business Development Grant. And if you do decide to dig into that, give me a call, and I will share it, because I've helped out on proposals to do that type of thing before to USDA. I've also, in the more distant past, had some successful proposals to USDA for programs that include interviews for business retention. So let's brainstorm that together if you want.
Okay, define construction-ready documents.
I think you should ask Daniel this question, but construction-ready documents in the context of our New Mexico MainStreet Public Infrastructure program mean documents from which you can build. In other words, are you ready to build? Are you close to being ready to build? I believe, but I'm not sure, check with Daniel on this, I believe they don't have to be the final construction documents, but got to be darn well close to them. So that would be something to ask the specifics of Daniel, but you know, construction ready means you're ready to build off them.
Yes, with any of the opportunities that I mentioned, certainly check with those coordinators for eligibility criteria for those calls. Let's see. Is there any additional?
Can we go back to that first question?
Let's see. So it says other sources of funding for trails and streets. We can look to NDOT as a source for those. Also, USDOT has the Tiger Grant Program, which I think you mentioned you would look into that opportunity.
Okay. Well then, thank you for who submitted that question. It wasn't a question so much as a suggestion of other good programs to look into. So we'll add those to the list and investigate them.
And our next webinar for New Mexico Main Street will be on June 29th. And this is related to the new MainStreet America brand and kind of an overview of the brand, and that will be tied to affiliated and accredited MainStreet America programs. Well, thank you all so much for joining us today, and we will have this recording available on our New Mexico Main Street YouTube channel. If for some reason you didn't download these documents at this time, the handouts that Keith provided, we can get those to you as well. They're also going to be available on the Main Street website under resources. So again, and Keith has presented a lot of really interesting and informative information today, but it would be understandable if, as you and take this in a little bit, you will certainly have follow-up questions, and please don't hesitate to contact New Mexico Main Street with those questions. So thank you all for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, and I look forward to hearing from you.